is part of a trend that suggests Somalis really are sick of fighting and ready to work with the government. Peter Grester, Al Jazeera in Merka, southern Somalia.
33,000 extra U.S. soldiers sent to Afghanistan 3 years ago have now left. The surge troops were sent by President Obama to help push back the Taliban and allow Afghan government forces time to take over the security of their country. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta confirmed the withdrawal, saying a milestone had been reached. More details now. The extra troops sent in 2010 boosted the total number of U.S. soldiers to just over 100,000. The transition began the following March with Afghan national security forces responsible for areas home to 25% of the country's population just over a year later. And their zone of responsibility has grown to encompass 75% of the population. Kurt Volker is a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, and he joins me now from Washington. Kurt, good to talk to you. Did the surge of troops into Afghanistan work?
Well, I don't think we can say that at this point. We saw a surge. We saw an ability to push the Taliban back. We saw some improvements in many measures that we would look at in Afghanistan. And yet at the same time, I don't think anyone can feel that we've created sustainability and success in Afghanistan. The Taliban still feels relatively strong. The Afghan security forces are still to be trained up. And as we continue to reduce the international presence there, we really don't know if the Afghan security forces are going to be capable of maintaining security and order in the country, or whether we're going to be seeing a return of the Taliban and perhaps the ANSF functioning more in support of the northern tribes, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras, and the Tajiks.
So, Kurt, we don't know. But what are your thoughts? What do you think? 2014 will be here before we know it. What are your thoughts on what happens with Afghanistan when coalition forces leave?
Well, I think that's the big worry right now. I think 2014 is going to come up faster than we know, as you said. I think having set a deadline, we sent a signal to the Taliban that in the end they know we're going to be gone. And that signal also goes to the Afghan population at large, meaning that they know the Taliban will be there and they know that we'll be gone. And so that has a psychological effect on where people are placing their bets in the country. In addition to that, you have a presidential election in 2014. It's quite conceivable that that would be an inconclusive election or a contested election, as we saw the last time. You could see the Taliban, as people know and see the international forces departing, reasserting control in the south. And you could see the government suddenly looking very, very unstable and very weak in Afghanistan by 2014. I think that, frankly, the best thing to do at this point would be to take a pause, take 2014 off the table, focus on the outcome, focus on the strategy. What kind of Afghanistan do we want to leave behind that will be helpful and sustainable for the people of that country, and put our efforts against that. The more you emphasize the deadline and the drawdowns, the more I'm afraid that it's a signal that the Taliban is gaining the upper hand.
And politically, in the States, I would imagine it would be tough to take that timeline off the table. But I wonder, let me pick up on that point. Senator John McCain, as you know, has said the U.S. should consider withdrawing the rest of the troops sooner than the 2014 timeline. What are your thoughts ultimately? Maybe you've just sort of paraphrased it, the idea of looking at the end goal here.
You have two options. You have the option of pulling out completely and saying that we are not prepared to do what it takes to turn this country around, and so why spend another life, why spend another bullet, why put all this effort into something if we're not prepared to see it through an outcome anyway. So that's one option. And I have to say that's a very popular option in this country right now, also popular in Europe among our NATO allies. But then you do worry about human rights, about women's issues, about education, about development, about the return and the victory of extremists in Afghanistan and the region. The alternative is don't be driven by a deadline that is artificial and that may not produce a result, but rather be driven by the barometers of success that you're trying to achieve and stick with it for a long period of time. It's been a long time already, but clearly we haven't gotten to that point of sustainability. There does need to be an Afghan lead. I think the strategy of training Afghan security forces, reducing the international presence, and helping the Afghans is the right strategy. But we can't put a timeline on that. We've got to put a barometer of success on that.
Boy, that's a heck of a debate that's going on in the States and around the world as well. Kurt, appreciate it. Kurt Volker is a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, joining me from Washington. Kurt, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
An Amish community in the U.S. state of Ohio says it will be destroyed If 16 men and women found guilty of hate crimes are sent to jail, the group cut the hair and beards off other members of their community for refusing to conform to their religious customs. Tom Ackerman has our report.
Both the attackers and their victims belong to a farm settlement in the state of Ohio who follow the Amish faith. They reject modern conveniences, including electric power, and demand obedience of their leaders. The attackers admit they chopped off the male victims' traditional beards and women's long hair to shame them for what were seen as defiance of strict Amish beliefs. The leader of the community, who prosecutors said ordered the attack, has been accused by his followers of